Michael Jordan was not just the king of basketball. He was a force of nature who lifted 6 championships, earned 5 MVP crowns, and built an empire so powerful it reshaped American culture itself. But behind the legend, behind the sneakers, behind the gravity-defying highlights, lies a moment so brutal it nearly destroyed him forever. July 23, 1993, the day the greatest athlete on earth fell to his knees. His father, James Jordan Sr., the man who guided him from a cut high school kid to a global icon, was taken from him in a violent moment that shocked the nation. One attack, one night on a quiet North Carolina road, and suddenly the strongest competitor alive collapsed like an ordinary son who had just lost his entire world. That was the fracture, the wound deeper than any fall on hardwood, the night the Jumpman stopped flying. In this video, we step inside the triumphs, the storms, the fame, and the heartbreaks that shaped Michael Jordan into something far greater than an athlete, a man rebuilt by pain and lifted by legacy. If you love stories of courage, resilience, and greatness, remember to subscribe. And tell me, you watching this right now, what year were you born? July 23rd, 1993. A date that sliced through Michael Jordan's life like a bolt of lightning tearing across a calm sky. Only a few hours earlier, he stood as the most unstoppable athlete on the planet. 3 straight championships, a basketball empire worth more than $200 million, a father who filmed every achievement with the same pride other his parents reserved for graduation day. By nightfall, all of it collapsed. News arrived that James Jordan Sr., the man who shaped Michael's spirit from childhood, had been attacked while resting inside his car. 2 strangers, 1 gun, a senseless act that ended the life of the only person Michael trusted more deeply than any coach or teammate he ever played with. The phone slid from his hand. The room tilted. The entire world that once bowed beneath his feet suddenly felt no bigger than a cracked sidewalk in Wilmington, North Carolina. At the funeral, witnesses saw something they thought they would never see. Michael Jordan trembling, not the superstar who averaged more than 40 points per game in the 1993 finals, not the global icon whose face sold sneakers on every continent. In that moment, he was only a 30-year-old son, placing his palm on a casket covered in white lilies and trying to speak to a father who would never answer again. On that day, the Jumpman did not rise. He folded under the weight of grief. Fans would later celebrate his flu game, his last shot, his record-setting season of 72 wins. Yet those closest to him, men like Phil Jackson, Scottie Pippen, and Gus Lett, understood the deeper truth. This was the blow that cracked the armor. This was the night the strongest competitor in modern sports finally fell to a battle no amount of talent could overcome. And before we return to his rise, his triumphs, and the dynasty he built, we must start here with the night the greatest player alive was brought to his knees. Before the fame, before the rings, before the day the world shattered for him, we have to go back, way back, back to a time when Michael Jordan was not a legend, not a symbol, not a billion-dollar empire. He was only a boy trying to breathe inside a crowded house where dreams were small, money was tight, and nothing about his future looked extraordinary. February 17, 1963. Inside a modest brick home in Wilmington, North Carolina, Michael Jeffrey Jordan entered the world as the 4th of 5 children. His father, James Jordan Sr., worked long, punishing hours at GE and later at a textile plant. His mother, Dolores Jordan, juggled shifts at a bank while raising a family that felt more like a full team of energy and chaos. They had 5 mouths to feed and not a single shortcut to survival. Their backyard was not a training ground. It was a patch of cracked dirt where battles were fought every afternoon, and the king of that court was never Michael. It was Larry. Larry Jordan, the older brother built like a spark plug, quicker than a summer storm, and fierce enough to turn every game into war. Family friends swear they once watched Larry beat Michael 15 times in a row. Back then, Larry was the star. Michael was the shadow. Those losses hit him harder than any Detroit Piston ever would. But something sharper grew from them. A hunger, a fire, a refusal to stay second to anyone, even inside his own house. Then came 1978, the year the world told him he was not enough. 15-year-old Michael walked into Emsley, Laney High School, scanning the varsity list tacked on the wall. He looked once, twice, a third time. His name was nowhere. Students whispered behind him. Some laughed. For Michael, that hallway felt like watching the ground open beneath his feet. He walked home slowly, head down, heart broken. When he reached his room, he closed the door and cried. Not quiet tears. Deep, heavy, breath-stealing sobs that only a teenager who feels the world turning against him can understand. Then came the sound that would shape the rest of his life. His father's footsteps. James Jordan sat beside him with the calm of a man who had fought through life's storms. He told Michael that disappointment was not a wall. It was a doorway. That greatness was born in the dark where no one was watching. Those words rewired him. That night he picked up a basketball and dribbled until the sound echoed through every room like a heartbeat. And from that night forward he rose before sunrise, practiced after school, pushed his body until it trembled, shot until the sky turned black. Every bounce of the ball was a promise. Every beat of sweat was rebellion against that varsity list. You will not decide who I become. I will. By 1981, he had grown taller, stronger, sharper. Larry no longer dominated. The family saw it first, then the coaches, then the scouts. Michael Jordan was no longer the boy in the shadow. He was a storm-gathering strength, fueled by rejection and guided by the one man who believed in him long before the world ever would. And that fire he built in childhood would be the same fire he reached for the day that man was taken from him forever. Before he became the face of the NBA, before he lifted 6 championships and built a global empire worth billions, Michael Jordan had to survive something far more intimidating than any defender. He had to survive college basketball at the University of North Carolina, a place where pressure hung in the air like humidity and where boys either grew up fast or disappeared completely. The fall of 1981, a skinny 18-year-old freshman arrived in Chapel Hill carrying nothing but talent, nervous energy, and the fire he had forged the night he was cut from varsity. He stepped onto a campus that looked more like a cathedral than a school, towering brick buildings, endless pathways, gyms echoing with the footsteps of players already anointed as future stars. On that campus, Michael was no longer the best. He was a nobody again. In those first weeks, he felt smaller than he had felt since the day he stared at the varsity list at Laney High School. Older players were faster, stronger, and smarter. They read plays like seasoned generals. Michael sometimes felt like a recruit holding a toy weapon in a room full of soldiers. The practices were brutal. Dean Smith, the legendary coach whose calm voice could silence an entire arena, demanded precision. He did not care that Michael could jump higher than anyone else. He cared that Michael learned the system, respected the details, and understood that star power meant nothing without discipline. Michael hated it. Not the coach, the waiting. He wanted to explode, to take over practice, to show everyone he was different. But Dean Smith held him back like a patient craftsman shaping raw material. Some evenings, Michael walked out of the gym feeling like the invisible kid he once was, the one who cried in his room while his father tried to build him back up. And just like back then, when doubt tightened around his chest, he reached for the phone. He called home. He searched for his father's voice. James Jordan reminded him to breathe, reminded him that pressure was not punishment, it was preparation, reminded him that God never wasted pain and never wasted talent. Those late-night conversations became the thread that stitched Michael back together each time uncertainty tried to pull him apart. Still, nothing prepared him for what happened next. The moment that transformed him from a talented teenager into the man the world would one day call the greatest. March 29, 1982, New Orleans, the NCAA National Championship game, North Carolina versus Georgetown. The Superdome was packed with more than 60,000 fans, and the noise rolled across the arena like thunder rolling across an open field. Millions watched on television. This was not a game. This was scripture being written in real time. Michael was a freshman. No one expected him to decide the outcome of the biggest night in college basketball. The final seconds bled off the clock. The ball moved across the floor with a kind of panic that feels almost musical. Then, almost accidentally, it found Michael. For a split second, the world froze. Time stretched like rubber pulled to its breaking point. Even the fans seemed to hold their breath. Michael rose into the air. It was not the high soaring leap he would become famous for. It was controlled, balanced, almost gentle. In that fraction of a moment, he remembered a backyard in Wilmington. He remembered a father kneeling beside him at dusk, teaching him how to trust his instincts. He remembered the night he cried after being cut from varsity, and the voice that told him, disappointment is not a wall, it is a doorway. Those memories rose with him, and they guided the ball as it left his fingertips. Swish. The net snapped open like a secret being revealed. The shot that changed everything. The shot that gave North Carolina the national championship. The shot that Dean Smith later called the birth of Michael Jordan. The stadium erupted. Teammates tackled him. Fans screamed so loudly the concrete seemed to vibrate. But inside Michael, something quieter happened. Something deeper. Something that would shape the rest of his life. He finally believed. For years he had played like someone trying to prove people wrong. But that night he played like someone who finally understood he was right. His talent, his instincts, his will. Everything he carried from childhood clicked into place like the pieces of a lock turning at the same time. That shot launched him into national fame. Sports magazines placed him on covers. Scouts circled his name like it was a treasure map. Television analysts talked about the freshman who broke open the championship as if he had stepped out of a dream rather than a locker room. But what the world did not know, what only Michael understood, was that the shot was not the end of something. It was the beginning, a spark that lit the fuse of a dynasty. Because from that moment forward, Michael stopped being the kid who was cut from varsity. He stopped being the boy chasing his older brother in the backyard. He stopped being the freshman trying to survive practice. He became exactly who his father told him he could be. A force, a storm, a name large enough to carry the hopes of a city and eventually the weight of the entire basketball world. And yet, even on that historic night, as the confetti fell and reporters ran toward him, Michael looked into the stands. He searched for one face, one smile, one man holding a camcorder with pride glowing in his eyes. His father, the same man he would lose 11 years later. The same loss that would break him. The same memory that made this moment shine even brighter. Because the night Michael Jordan introduced himself to the world was also the night he learned the most important truth of his life. Greatness is not born in the spotlight. It is born in the quiet moments no one sees. And that night in 1982, the world finally saw what Michael and his father had known all along. He was meant for more. By the time Michael Jordan stepped into the NBA in 1984, Chicago was starving. The Bulls were a franchise with more empty seats than victories. A team searching for a savior they were not even sure existed. Yet within weeks, the city saw something it had never seen before. A rookie who scored 30 points with the ease most players scored 10. A kid who moved with the arrogance of a comet and the hunger of someone still running from a varsity list that once told him no. His rise was explosive, but so was the wall waiting for him. Detroit, the bad boys. They were not a basketball team. They were a demolition crew wearing jerseys. Bill Laimbeer with his elbows forged out of steel. Rick Mahorn built like a moving refrigerator. Dennis Rodman, a wild spirit whose defense felt more like a trap than a tactic. Their entire strategy was simple. If Michael Jordan left the court without bruises, they had not done their job. In 1988, Detroit sent the Bulls home. In 1989, they did it again. In 1990, they humiliated them a third time. 3 straight years. 3 times the same heartbreak. 3 times Michael walked off the court looking less like a superstar and more like a man carrying the weight of failure across his shoulders. And yet, something else happened each of those nights. Every time the locker room emptied and the reporters left, there was always one man still waiting for him. James Jordan Sr. He was not dressed like the staff. He did not walk around with authority. He stood in corners like a quiet guardian, holding a small camcorder, filming moments no one else bothered to record. Not the highlights, not the celebrations. The other moments, the ones after defeat when Michael sat with his face buried in a towel, wondering why destiny made him climb a mountain that seemed to grow taller every year. James never told him to cheer up. He never lectured him, never spoke in cliches. He simply watched him the way fathers watch sons who are learning the hard parts of life. Michael would look up, see his father holding that camera, and somehow feel the sting of losing turn into the fire of becoming. Then everything changed in 1991. The Bulls came back stronger. Michael had spent an entire summer building his body in ways the league had never seen. He added more than 10 pounds of muscle. He increased his vertical leap. He trained with a fury that made teammates unable to match his pace. He played defense as if he was attacking history itself. In the Eastern Conference Finals, Chicago finally met Detroit again, the team that had bullied him for 3 years. The men who had shoved him out of the air so many times that the world began to wonder if greatness had a limit. But this time there was no hesitation in his eyes, no fear, no doubt. Chicago swept Detroit in 4 games. 4 years of humiliation erased in one brutal, beautiful series. The moment the final buzzer sounded, every reporter in the country turned their cameras on Michael Jordan. But he was not looking at them. He was searching the crowd for one face. James. His father was there, filming his son with the same camcorder he had carried through every triumph and failure. When Michael reached him, they embraced in a way that said everything without words. This was not just a victory over Detroit. It was a victory over doubt, over childhood insecurities, over every person who once told him he would never be enough. The Bulls rode that momentum all the way to the NBA Finals, facing Magic Johnson and the Los Angeles Lakers. Michael did not just play basketball. He performed it. The move that defined the series came in Game 2. Michael soared toward the basket with his right hand extended, defenders bracing for the dunk. But in midair, as if gravity was a polite suggestion rather than a law of nature, he switched the ball into his left hand and gently laid it off the glass. Millions watching around the world felt their jaws drop. Even Magic shook his head with disbelief. Chicago won the championship for the first time in franchise history, and when the confetti fell, Michael Jordan collapsed into his father's arms, not because he was tired, but because he finally felt the weight of destiny shifting into place. 1992, another championship. 1993, the three-peat, 3 titles, 3 years, 3 trophies his father recorded with the same camera, never once pretending this was normal. James Jordan stood at nearly every game, wearing the joy of a man who knew he was witnessing something sacred. The boy he once comforted in a bedroom after a varsity rejection was now the most dominant athlete in America, and James captured it all. Little did anyone know that those videos, those moments, those smiles were some of the final memories they would ever share, because fate was preparing a twist so devastating that even Michael, a man who rewrote the laws of sports, could never outrun it. As Chicago celebrated the three-peat, a darker countdown had already begun, and the man behind the camera would soon be gone. October 6, 1993, the day Michael Jordan stood in front of microphones and announced he was walking away from basketball. Reporters stared in disbelief. Fans froze. Commentators choked on their own sentences. The greatest player alive, the man who averaged more than 41 points in the 93 finals, the man at the peak of his power, simply said he could not play anymore. But the truth behind that choice did not start that morning. It started 11 weeks earlier, when his father, James Jordan Sr., was taken from him in the cruelest way imaginable. Michael had spent the summer drowning in grief. The championship rings on his fingers felt heavier than lead. The applause felt insulting. The cameras felt like intruders at a funeral. When he looked at a basketball, he did not see joy. He saw an empty chair, a silent camcorder, a father who would never walk into an arena again. So on that October morning, he let go, but he did not let go for long. In February 1994, Michael Jordan stunned the world again. He signed a minor league baseball contract with the Chicago White Sox organization. the team owned by Jerry Reinsdorf, who also owned the Bulls. The city was confused. Analysts laughed. But Michael was not chasing publicity. He was chasing a promise. As a kid, his father once told him that he believed Michael could have become a professional baseball player, maybe even greater than he could ever be in basketball. James had played the game in the sandlots of North Carolina and dreamed of one day seeing his son swing a bat under stadium lights. Michael never got the chance to give him that moment, so he tried to give it to him now. Spring training began in 1994. Michael walked onto the baseball field wearing number 45, the number he wore as a child. The press counted every mistake, every strikeout, every stumble in the outfield. They wrote headlines calling him a fraud, an amateur, a celebrity gimmick pretending to be an athlete. But what they never saw were the mornings, the quiet ones, the ones before sunrise when Michael arrived hours early, the ones where his hands bled through his batting gloves, the ones where he stayed long after practice ended, hitting ball after ball in empty cages, the ones where he sat alone in minor league locker rooms, staring at a pair of cleats his father would never see him wear. His manager that season, Terry Francona, later admitted that Michael worked harder than half the league, not because he was trying to prove the critics wrong, but because he was trying to honor the man he lost. Michael was 31 years old. Most minor league players were barely 20. The journey was upside down. The millionaire playing with kids who shared cheap apartments and ate fast food to save money. Yet Michael embraced it. He carried his own bags. He rode the team bus. He sweated through games in front of crowds of 3,000 instead of 300,000 television viewers. And slowly something changed. Not in the league, in him. The grief that once swallowed him whole began to loosen its grip. The wound did not close, but it stopped bleeding. The game did not erase pain, but it gave him something to lean on. Baseball became a bridge, a connection to the father he lost, the sport he chose for love, not glory. Then came March 18, 1995, a day that shook the sports world like an earthquake. For 17 months, Michael Jordan had lived in silence. No dunks, no buzzer beaters, no highlight reels. Then a fax arrived, 2 words printed on a sheet of white paper, the shortest message in sports history and the loudest at the same time. I am back. Those 3 syllables hit like thunder. Television networks interrupted programming. Reporters sprinted through studios. Fans screamed in bars and living rooms. Even opponents felt their stomachs drop. Michael returned to the Bulls that same night. He walked into practice wearing number 45. He was leaner, quieter, hardened by loss. But the fire was there, flickering underneath the surface, waiting to be fed. His first games were rough. His timing was off. His legs felt heavy. He missed shots he once made with his eyes closed. But every night he stayed after practice, sweating through lonely hours in the gym as the lights flickered like tired stars. By the next season, the rust was gone. All of it. The 1995-96 Bulls finished with 72 wins and 10 losses. The greatest regular season record in NBA history at the time. Michael averaged more than 30 points at age 32. The man who had left basketball broken returned with the force of a hurricane. And he did it carrying his father with him. He wore number 23 again. He pointed to the sky after big shots. He spoke softly about destiny. When reporters asked why he came back, he never talked about the critics or the money or the championships. He said he needed to feel like himself again. The truth was deeper. Basketball was the last place where his father still felt close. That season, he looked into the empty seat where James once sat and whispered under his breath before games. Sometimes he said, "Thank you." Sometimes he said, "Help me." Sometimes he said nothing at all. He just hoped his father was watching. And as the Bulls marched toward a new dynasty, the world finally understood something Michael had known since the night he cried on his bedroom floor as a teenager. Pain can break you, or it can build you. And when you rise again, you rise stronger than anyone expects. June 14, 1998, a night carved into basketball history like a signature pressed into wet concrete. The Chicago Bulls were standing on the fragile edge of a dynasty that was falling apart. aging teammates, a fractured front office, a coach on the verge of walking away, and in the middle of it all stood Michael Jordan, 35 years old, carrying the weight of a city the way a bridge carries traffic. Quietly and without complaint, Game 6 of the finals, Utah on their home court. The score tied as the final seconds slipped away. Michael dribbled right, crossed left, and stepped back into a shot that seemed to hang in the air longer than any breath in the arena. The ball floated in a perfect arc, a silent comet slicing through a sky filled with noise. Swish. The Bulls won their sixth championship. Reporters called it the final crown. Fans called it the end of an era. Michael simply walked off the court with the calm of a man who had lived long enough to know that nothing gold ever stays. But destiny was not finished testing him. Months later, a freak accident injured his right index finger, the same hand that delivered the last shot. It was small, almost insignificant on paper, yet it whispered the truth all legends hate to hear. Time was coming for him. He retired again, not in defeat, but in acceptance. The next chapter of his life unfolded quietly, away from roaring arenas. He tried to build something stable at home, but stability has never been easy for men who live too long under bright lights. His marriage to Juanita, the woman who shared 13 years of triumphs and heartbreaks, reached its breaking point in 2002. 4 years later, the divorce became final. It was one of the largest settlements in American sports history, more than $160 million. But the real cost could not be measured in money. It was the loss of a home he once believed he could protect. Yet even broken things can bloom again. In 2013, Michael married Yvette Prieto, a woman who saw past the legend and into the quiet, complicated man behind it. A year later, they welcomed twin daughters, Victoria and Isabel, turning his house into a place filled with tiny footsteps and soft laughter. Michael, in his 50s, learned to hold bottles at 3 a.m, to sit cross-legged on the floor building puzzles, to be present in ways he had not been able to be when fame was louder than family. But even in those years of peace, loss still waited for him in the shadows. January 26, 2020. News broke that Kobe Bryant, his closest protege, his rival turned little brother, had died in a helicopter crash along with his daughter Gianna. The world fell silent. Michael fell with it. At the memorial in Los Angeles, he stood on stage, trying to speak, but grief spilled out faster than his words. He said that when Kobe died, a piece of him died too, and the world saw it. The tears, the shaking voice. The man once seen as unbreakable, finally allowing everyone to witness the cracks. By the time he reached his early 60s, Michael Jordan was more than an athlete. He was a billionaire entrepreneur with a fortune estimated near $3.5 billion. He owned estates stretching across Florida, North Carolina, and Illinois. His private jet, a customized Gulfstream, was known as one of the most luxurious in sports. His watch collection held pieces worth more than most houses. And yet, none of it mattered as much as the quiet things. Dinners with his wife, breakfast with his daughters, phone calls with his older children. Long afternoons where no cameras followed and no arena shouted his name. He had spent decades proving he could fly. Now he was learning how to stand still. Michael Jordan discovered that true greatness is not measured in championships or headlines. It is measured in the wounds you heal, the love you protect, and the peace you fight to keep. In the end, the man who once jumped higher than gravity finally found the only thing he ever truly needed: a place to land. As we reach the end of this journey, one truth rises above everything else. Michael Jordan was never just a superstar. He was never just the man who lifted 6 championships or the athlete who built a billion-dollar empire. He was a human being shaped by loss and lifted by love, pushed by doubt and fueled by belief. Broken more than once, yet always finding the strength to rise again. His story is not about perfection. It is about the courage to continue when the world stops cheering. It is about rebuilding when life takes something you thought you could not live without. It is about choosing discipline when talent is not enough, and choosing heart when strength begins to fade. Michael Jordan teaches us that greatness does not start on a court. It starts in small rooms where you cry after a failure. It starts in early mornings when no one is watching. It starts in the moments when you decide that life will not tell you who you are. You will. And maybe that is the lesson we all need, that no matter where we are, how old we are, or what we have lost, there is always a way forward. Sometimes it is loud, sometimes it is quiet, but it is always there waiting for us to take the next step. If this story inspired you, if it made you think a little deeper about your own journey, I invite you to subscribe and stay with us for more stories that remind us what human beings can become when they refuse to give up. And before you go, I want to know, you, the one watching right now, what year were you born? Let me know below. Know below. Know below. Know below.